our focus for this hour is on the ongoing tussle between MDC Alliance and the ruling Zanu-PF in Zimbabwe. Defeated opposition leader Nelson Chamisa has ruled out working with Zanu-PF in a coalition or government of national unity.
Well, his party, that's the MDC Alliance, has decided to file a petition with the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, maintaining the July 30th polls were rigged. The SABC's Peter Ndoro sat down for an exclusive chat with the MDC leader. Let's take a listen.
Mr. Chamisa, thanks very much indeed for giving us your time. Two things happened in the last 5 days that many will say has sealed your fate and perhaps cast your destiny going forward. Let's start with the first one, the inauguration. How did that make you feel personally, given that was a day that you thought was going to be yours?
Well, the inauguration in Zimbabwe has not yet been done. That one that was undertaken is simply a false one. I've already indicated that because it is forced. It is also built on false results. It is also built on disputed declared results, which are not a reflection of what the people voted for. So far from my fate being sealed, in any event, it's not about Chamisa. It's about the nation of Zimbabwe. It's about the people of Zimbabwe. They voted for a particular choice. They were cheated. They were deceived. And that deception and cheating is not going to last forever. It's just but temporary. So a setback does not necessarily mean that there's no comeback in terms of just the proper election that has to be declared.
But the constitutional process, the legal processes, all of the ones that you can use in Zimbabwe have been exhausted.
They have not been exhausted, Peter. We have had many routes and many avenues to a new Zimbabwe, one of which was the constitutional and legal route, which route is now a dead one because it has not produced what we would have wanted because of contestations around the process itself within the courts and also around the judgment itself in terms of our deficits we have already indicated and highlighted. But that's what under the bridge. The issue is with political avenue and political options that are available. The people are the ultimate arbiters in any political dispute. So we are very clear that the people of Zimbabwe, being the authors of the political processes, are going to ultimately be the ones to decide.
What does that mean?
It's very clear. We are going to be engaging the people. We are only but acting on behalf of the people in trustee or trusteeship of the people's mandate. So ultimately, it's not about what is declared by Chigumba, the ZEC commissioner, or what is declared by the Constitutional Court. It's more to do with the issues of legitimacy. In as much as
how are you going to do this? Because it sounds like something unconstitutional, something revolutionary that you want to do.
The Constitution actually supports revolutions. That's why it calls for demonstrations that are peaceful. So we are going to exhaust the Constitution in terms of Section 59. That gives us the power to demonstrate peacefully, to demonstrate legally, to demonstrate constitutionally, and also to demonstrate as the people, because we have every right to demonstrate. Now, Mr. Mnangagwa is aware of the outcome. He knows that he was defeated in this election. They did what they did. But you see, they can run, but they can't hide.
August 1, people demonstrated in the streets, and a question that's being raised is, did you send those protesters out onto the streets, or did they go of their own accord? 6 people died. This may happen again if you take this route.
Well, let me just tell you that all our demonstrations have been peaceful. That one was not our demonstration. In fact, if it was our demonstration, it was not going to have a few people. Our demonstrations have thousands and masses because we do have masses. That's why you see Mr. Mnangagwa at the inauguration. The stadium had problems. It's not the usual figures that you would have for a national inauguration. They had to go to Dynamos and Highlanders as the football clubs to try and bring people. They had to go to musicians to try and bring people together. And they had to try and put people into the mood of celebrating. But people are not interested in celebrating because they know that they can't celebrate a lie. They can't celebrate a falsehood. Mr. Mnangagwa did not win the election, even by ZEC fudged and engineered figures. Mr. Mnangagwa has the control of less than half of the population in this country. He doesn't control the urban areas. We have 26 mayors. We control all the metropoles, all the cities, all the towns. Now, Mr. Mnangagwa would want to pretend to be the president of Zimbabwe, when in fact he's just in charge of some of the claimed rural areas. So, yes, in terms of August 1 incident, it's clear that this was an illegal act.
These were not your people.
These were not our people. Whoever was violent, that was totally unacceptable. But the police were supposed to kick in.
But they did it in your name, though.
Well, look, I was a candidate. There was no other candidate. So you don't choose supporters, do you?
So 9 Constitutional Court judges heard this case, and they said things like, you didn't produce enough evidence, that you made allegations, but there was no prima facie evidence that they could hold, that they could take into their hands to rule in your favor. Clear that up for us.
As an officer of court, at the risk of sounding like I want to re-argue my case, it's very clear that there were other issues beyond just issues of law. And those issues are going to be unpacked at the appropriate time. But what is clear is that we had requested the issuing of a subpoena to subpoena the ZEC offices to produce a server. Because on this server, we were convinced, and we are convinced, and they know it, because we also had people from within ZEC who were confirming this, unofficially though, that yes, the server is there. They were loading results real time. When they realized that the results were in favor of Chamisa, they started then creating a parallel process, which is almost like an Excel spreadsheet, where you then change figures. They refused, as a court, to allow us to issue that subpoena, which was basically the best form of primary evidence. It's on record. We actually have letters to that effect.
Why didn't you order a recount?
Well, why do you want to recount what has already been distorted? You're only recounting fiction.
But the ballot boxes inside the box wouldn't have been distorted, surely? That somebody would have put a cross there.
No, but you must. We have evidence to what has been done, to cover up. I mean, we may not, like I told you, at the appropriate time we're going to review this. But you see, there's a lot that was being done. After the voting, a lot of V11 forms were actually being changed. It's on record. It's before the court. Some of the V11s, where we do not have an agreement, it's on record. You are aware of where they to go backwards to try and cover their tracks. So we said, as far as we are concerned, our matter was not going to be proved on the basis of just the opening of the ballot. They wanted us to open. But there are two things there. Number one, we knew that what was there was already poisoned. So we didn't want to go on a cul-de-sac or some walk in the park, which leads us to nowhere. Number two, there is a court decision prior to that. In 2013, Timber challenged on behalf of the MDC to say we want the boxes to be open. There is a ruling by the same court which said go back to the residue to say that when in a harmonized election, you can't reopen the ballot boxes without causing problems. So we knew that that is also a blocked route, but they were now saying go and open the residue. For what? Our case was not on the basis of the residue. It was on the basis of the V11s. It was on and we adjusted them. It was on the basis of the figures by ZEC, 3 different figures.
Do you think the court heard enough to have come to the conclusions that you would have preferred, or they purposefully ignored evidence? How did we get to the conclusion that we got to?
Like I said, I'm an officer of court, being an advocate with the superior courts. But what is clear is that this was televised. You saw the kind of interrogation that was done to our legal practitioner. And you then saw the kind of a honky-dory affair that was given to the respondents, especially ZEC with their inconsistent figures. How on earth would you have ZEC declaring that Mnangagwa is the winner? Up to now, they do not know the actual figure. So how does Mnangagwa become the winner?
Did you go to the Constitutional Court with a preconceived feeling that maybe, or with a feeling that maybe you're not going to get the decision?
Well, we genuinely thought that the Constitutional Court, being a new creature after the new Constitution, would do what is expected of them, to uphold constitutionalism, rule of law, and legality. It's clear that, that ZEC jumped the stages. ZEC did not follow the law. ZEC declared a false result. It's clear, and that's the position we are making. And we are going at appropriate time to give our factual basis because we have the evidence.
You constantly say at the appropriate time, even before the Constitutional Court hearing, appropriate time, appropriate time. People keep waiting.
We don't want to be seen as if we are going against the law. We have a constitutional court. We want the ventilation of those issues within the constitutional court. Now that the ventilation was not properly accorded, this is why we have taken this matter to the African court, not for a remedy to revise, but for a remedy to make sure that there's a validation or invalidation of what we feel are commissions and omissions, transgressions, and in some cases, violations of the dictates of evidential rules.
This bid at the African Commission for Human and People's Rights, you're not genuinely believing you'll get a decision there. I mean, Zimbabwe's ratified that commission and its processes, but in recent years, it's been ignoring all the recommendations. Why would Zimbabwe now change and respond to that commission if it came up with any findings?
Our remedy is not in a decision that is going to overturn the decision in Zimbabwe. Our remedy is in the truth being known. The factual conspectus has to be available for the continent, for the people of Zimbabwe to know what exactly happened. Because we thought that we were going to genuinely get this in the Constitutional Court. We didn't. So we are going to explore the various platforms. The African Court is one of them because we believe in African institutions, African solutions to African problems. And we have genuine desire to see this issue being resolved. But beyond that, let the people of Zimbabwe decide. Like I told you, we have our political rights, we have our political platforms. We'll explore and exploit those ones to make sure that within the confines of rule of law and peace, we will ultimately say enough is enough. Because as you look at it, my brother Peter, we are going to be back to square one 5 years from now. Because the fundamental issues of disputation have not been resolved. We have problems with the way ZEC is constituted. It's not independent. It's captured. I know there's the Gupta's problem in South Africa. It's almost like a Gupta situation in our context. I will not go into the details because I don't want to ruffle feathers. But that issue is a problem with ZEC. We have a problem with issues of rural areas that are not liberated. People don't vote on their own volition or will. They are commandeered into voting. There's command voting. There's command politics. People are commandeered and frog marched into the polling stations through assisted voters, command voting. We must deal with that.
All right. So in the meantime, Zimbabweans want change. They want a better life.
Indeed.
And right now, even the commission in Banjul, it may take a year to even deal with it.
We are not going to wait for that, my brother Peter. We have our own courts here in Zimbabwe. Our streets are going to become new courts. Our platforms...
So you're going to make the country ungovernable?
It will be governable because we are not the ones who are governing it. It is governable if they are able to govern it.
Okay, so your demonstrations will be peaceful. So what will be the compulsion for government to give up power?
Look, we are not asking them to give up power. For us, the ultimate objective is not power. The ultimate objective is a happy life, a better life, an alternative life, a life based on opportunity, transparency, transformation, and of course, prosperity for the people of Zimbabwe. That is only possible. For a person to govern the governed, there has to be consent of the governed. And that consent is voluntarily given. And we are ready to say, as a people, let us engage our government, the government which is currently there, on the basis of a declared result, which is fictitious and false.
Is there a third way? Because again, the people can't wait for a long time for the change that they desire. Is there a third way where you say, Mr. Mnangagwa, let's sit down together? Between you and I, we know what happened, whatever that event is, but let's work together because actually both of us have the people's interests at heart. Is there not a third way where you two can compromise and say, for the good of the people, it doesn't matter who was right, but more that we find a way to make people's lives better?
Dialogue, cooperation is very important, but it has to be based on facts and the truth. Now, once we have dialogue based on the foundation of deception and falsehoods, that Mr. Mnangagwa won the election when he didn't, he knows it. He's aware of the truth, but he's cheating the whole world And some of the world leaders are actually falling for it. Hook, line, and sinker. Very unfortunate. But I'm glad that most of the African leaders are very clear. They are seeing through his tactics. Only 6 or so came for the inauguration out of about 53 or so, which was quite indicative of the view that they have on how political power has been attained in Zimbabwe. We need the return to legitimacy. And I've said I'm ready anytime to engage Mr. Mnangagwa, because I'd already written to him a letter before elections, my brother, to indicate that we need dialogue on the free and fair elections. We need dialogue on post-election working together in the context of building our country. He refused to meet with me. After the election, he has sent a tweet message to say, I'm ready, my hands are open. But you know, you are saying your hands are open, but they are dirty hands. You have stolen an election now. And there has to be curing of that mischief. Let's go back to the drawing board and agree on the result, the will of the people. Once we agree on that, we then move to the next stage.
What you're saying is that unless you're president, because you say that's the will of the people, unless you're president, this country can't move forward.
It can move forward, but I've even taken a very magnanimous position. And you must actually see how magnanimous I am. You know, I've said, look, in as much as I've won the election, but let there be discourse on the fundamental issues. How do we restore legitimacy? How do we go back to legitimacy and constitutionalism and the rule of law? Because that has been violated. How do we make sure that we go back to free and fair elections that are not disputed? Because 5 years down the line, in 2020, there will be another election, there will be a dispute. Zimbabwe is in a vicious circle of dispute. Why should we go to an election to reproduce dispute? Why should we go to an election to reproduce a disagreement? Elections are supposed to be a happy affair, to move countries forward, to move the nation forward. But it's not possible. Why? There's dispute around the composition of ZEC, the independence of ZEC, the professionalism of ZEC. Those issues need dialogue. We need political and legal reforms, constitutional reforms.
Which will take time.
They don't take time. Once you agree on that, you can then agree on an economic program. And I have no doubt that Mr. Mnangagwa is unable to move this country forward. He's incapable, unwilling, and not, you know, in a good position.
But the international community seems to have accepted the result.
Which international community?
The election observers, we haven't heard anyone saying that this result was null and void.
Well, look, the null and void is not the role of the international observers, it's the people of Zimbabwe. And that is something that we are dealing with right now. The international observer teams have indicated that the election was less than perfect in many ways.
Yes, less than perfect, but not to a degree that people were disenfranchised.
No, of course, they have indicated that some were disenfranchised. There was, you know, the issue of assisted voters in the countryside, forced voting, all those issues were highlighted. Even the issue of the independence of ZEC. How do you have an election without a voters' roll? Even in South Africa, it's bizarre, where you go to write an exam, a matric, you know, examination without a syllabus. But we did it and won elections under those circumstances.
Paul Kagame, representing the African Union, was here on Sunday.
Sure.
He says Zimbabwe's turned the corner and President Mnangagwa now is in charge. How do you have a conversation with the continent if the top body of the continent has pretty much endorsed this election?
Well, that's President Kagame's view, which view we have had to engage him on so that we help him see the other side. He was articulating, and I understand because he had seen Mr. Mnangagwa, who gave him one-sided a story. But we gave him the other view, and we hope that he is going to revise his position.
Let's talk about the MDC. You've got a National Council meeting tomorrow, I believe.
Indeed.
Now, I'm just going to put on my... I'm a normal citizen on the street, and one of the things that I'm grappling with is, who is MDC? You know, since 2005, I think, we had Mutambara leaving and all these factions. We're now not even sure which MDC Nelson Chamisa represents. Is it MT, what is it?
I think it's just the confusion you have, but the citizens are very clear. That's why in the voting, you wouldn't get 2.6 million votes when there's confusion about who MDC is or what MDC is. People are very clear.
But they voted for Nelson Chamisa in the presidential.
Yes.
And they voted 67...
We have 88 constituencies. I mean, MPs in the lower house. But again, if you look at most of the constituencies, it's because of rigging. In almost 30 or so constituencies, they are contested. So it's not as if, and we've gone to court about it. So it's not as if we did not get even a majority in the parliamentary. We had a massive support. Now, back to your question. The MDC is very clear. The MDC is the MDC. There will not be any other MDC. There has been Coupe who was expelled and then decided to masquerade as MDC. And she used the MDCT. She got a paltry, vote. And you saw her at the inauguration.
But the courts say that she has the rights to
No court has said that. In fact, we had taken this matter to the court to say she should not use this name. But we withdrew it because we had seen that she was actually working together with the government to try and do some funny things. But we are pursuing that matter, and she will not be allowed to use the name of the party beyond.
Do you think that the party needs to rebrand? Some would say that the personality of Morgan Tsvangirai was the party.
Not at all. If Morgan Tsvangirai got 1.2 million votes, we got 2.6 million votes. So how does that argument, survive or subsist? The party has even grown bigger. The party is the largest party, not only in Zimbabwe, but even on the continent. And this is a massive party with over 26 mayors across the whole country. That you can't say that there's confusion.
This rural-urban story, maybe explain.
But I answered on the issue of the MDC. Yes. Because it's also very important for you to be very clear that the leader of the MDC is the one you are talking to.
All right. And it may be that when the next election comes, because what we're seeing is patterns developing over time, is that just before an election, somehow there's a split.
Yes, Peter, these are machinations by Zanu-PF. We are dealing with a very difficult, opponent. An opponent that mutates into being your proponent for purposes of dividing you from time to time. They've done this, it's their old tactic, but it has not worked. They always want to come and work in cahoots with our own so that they are taken to fight us, to weaken us, but they've not succeeded. And you will see that going forward, we are also putting in place constitutional and legal mechanisms to make sure that people do not run away from the party and want to use the name of the party. That will not happen.
Are people not fatigued? I mean, for how long will they march? For how long? Is there not a way of saying, okay, maybe we weren't outvoted, but we were outplayed this time. Maybe let's look towards the next election, but find a way to get organized.
We will not do that. We must protect our vote. We must defend our vote. Otherwise, we will not be able to convince any Zimbabwean to vote 5 years down the line. Because if their vote does not count, why should we ask them to vote again? We must protect the vote. And it is our collective national duty to protect that vote. Mind you, we're not dealing with a very ordinary situation. It's an extraordinary arrangement here. We have a government that always relies on quasi-military, tactics and tactics to try and subsist and reproduce itself in power. Those are the issues we must be able to deal with. But people are not fatigued at all, Peter. People are energized. In fact, people are actually saying, don't work with these people. Mr. Chamisa, don't join hands with the crocodile. You will drown, you will be sunk, and you will be consumed. Like what happened to President Tsvangirai when he worked with Robert Mugabe. You know what happened? He was diluted. We were diluted. We ended up being diverted in focus and manipulated out of government. We will not allow that. We will not allow ourselves to be compromised. It's not about power. It's not about positions. It's about the proposition we want for our country, which is a narrative of alternative politics on the basis of rule of law, on the basis of respecting the citizens on what they want.
So your thoughts about, it looks like President Robert Mugabe, former President Robert Mugabe, pretty much endorsed President Mnangagwa, sending his daughter, sending this letter, saying, congratulations, Your Excellency. Where does that put you? How do you interpret that? And also that you'd mentioned his name at your last rally, saying, we're getting the support of Mugabe.
Look, he voted and he indicated that he was going to vote for me. He has decided to send a congratulatory message. It's his right as a citizen to do whatever he wants. But that has no bearing in terms of what the people of Zimbabwe want. Mr. Mugabe is part of our past, but certainly not part of our future. And going forward is about us, we, the citizens, defining what we want. The people shall govern, and we are going to govern, not the elite, a parasitic elite for that matter. We are not going to allow that.
What's your relationship with the Mugabes?
I have no relationship other than the relationship between the voted and the voter. Mr. Mugabe being the voter, myself being voted. Mr. Mugabe is not on the ballot, and he's not going to be on the ballot for a long time to come.
So you have no business relationship?
I have no business relationship.
People say that you transport goods for Mrs. Mugabe to her farm?
Well, see, happy news there, but sad news. Happy in the sense that people think that I'm such an endured guy, because they see how properly wired we are in our arguments, in how we are organizing society. It does not necessarily mean that we own anything. Other than that, we are hard workers. You can see, these are my chambers. This is where I work from. This is where I earn an income. Why would I come to be, spending midnight oil as an advocate away from my business? I have no business. I've never been in business. But you see, people always want to find convenient issues. Some will even say Chamisa and Mnangagwa work together. This and that. Things are being said. Why? Because they can't manage me. They can't understand where I stand, because I'm a consistent and a principled leader, wishing to see Zimbabwe going forward. I will never compromise on principle. So they want to invent and engineer controversies and their own conspiracies, which have nothing to do with the truth. I have never had any business with Mr. Mnangagwa, with Mr. Mugabe, and I don't have any business with them other than the business of politics between the citizen and another citizen. Myself requesting to be voted and him voting. It doesn't go beyond.
So what do you say to people who say Chamisa is a bit too brash, that perhaps he's a bit young and naive, and some would even use the word a bit of a megalomaniac? How do you manage your personality and explain it to people who are saying that, maybe the next time he'll be ready? This time he was a bit too high.
But Peter, I don't understand which voices you are listening to. 2.6 million people voted for this Chamisa. And go and ask them, they will not tell you what you are saying. But if you listen to Mnangagwa, he will tell you that. If you listen to Mnangagwa's acolytes and his own appendages, they will tell you that. But don't listen to those. They are not credible voices about what we stand for. We stand for the alternative. And people voted for that alternative. It's not as if Mr. Mnangagwa defeated us in an election. If he had defeated us, it would be a different story. We won this election. They know it. We all know it. The world knows it, that the election was won. So this whole thing about Chamisa being that and that, yes, everyone has the right to make their conclusion. But I'm a young African who is willing to see democracy taking root in a young African country. And that does not make me megalomaniac in any way. If anything, I've been very reasonable. Where would you have a young man so energetic and so ably supported by the people of Zimbabwe, choosing peaceful means instead of violent means, choosing much more carefully articulated route to democracy, like constitutionalism, going to court? Where else would you have that kind of a person? A person who chooses dialogue as opposed to confrontation. A person who is saying, you have stolen an election, but we can still talk about our country and build our nation together, modernize our country. Where on earth would we have a person like that?
Have you made some mistakes that you can own up to and say, I wish I'd have done this differently?
I've not made, well, like any other human being, I make mistakes. But in the context of politics, I don't think that we've made any mistake. We've won the election. The only mistake, perhaps, is to continue to expect and accept those who have not won an election to be in office any day longer.
You had a think tank that you put together before the elections, and you said that we've got great minds, we're going to make sure that this election is not stolen.
Sure.
Did they fail to see some of the things that might have come up, or what would you have done differently?
Up to the election, we were making sure that everything is in shape and in proper place. That's why we won the election. But beyond the election, declaration of an election can't be done by a think tank. It has to be done by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and a commissioner of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission who is compromised. So beyond that, you have to then talk about reconstituting ZEC to have integrity, to have people with impeccable honesty. As it is, we have problems. So you can't blame your think tanks, you can't blame your own strategies, you can't say it's a mistake. Because ZEC is the constitutional body, but they actually had a mistake in their execution of the constitutional mandate. It's not our problem, it's their problem. And that's why we need national dialogue to resolve that.
What conversations are you having with the international community now, and what are they saying to you?
Very amicable conversations, mutual respect, and we appreciate. They continue to insist on minimum standards to free and fair election, and they are not obviously giving a broad brush of endorsement on this election because they know that it had deficits, and I'm happy with that. We are engaging the international community to continue to support the people of Zimbabwe. Let it not be an issue of solidarity with Mnangagwa so that it's a solidarity with the elite. Let it be a solidarity with the people of Zimbabwe.
But what are they saying to you specifically?
Well,
they pick up the phone, they say, is that Nelson Chamisa? What did they say next?
Most of them have congratulated us for the victory. They've also tried.
The victory?
Yes, it's a victory. I can tell you, I've had calls from the Secretary General of the United Nations, from the British government, from the United States. They have all been saying, you have done very well.
Yeah, having done very well means you've doubled your votes, but it doesn't mean you've won.
Of course we have won this election. They were waiting for the declaration of the Constitutional Court, but beyond that I've not been able to engage with them to hear what their views.
So you haven't spoken to them after the Constitutional
Yes,
ruling?
but of course they know that we won this election. They have information, they have their own reports.
But it's out of their hands now though, isn't it? Once the court had
It's
decided.
now in our hands as the people of Zimbabwe. And that's why we are going to say we will deliver them an outcome on the basis of who we are.
You say that President Mnangagwa cannot fix this country. Are you saying he's done nothing in the last 9 months?
Well, I don't know what he has done. I wish I would have said he has done this, that, and that. I've not seen anything.
I've seen roads that have improved.
That's the city council.
So it's not...
He doesn't do roads in the urban areas. So I've not seen the road that they... Yes, the road that they had promised. I know that they cancelled the deal and they just dug up 1 or 2 holes and they stopped, which was the South African highway from the Bedbridge, border post to Harare.
He's managed to secure some international commitments for FDI into the country.
Which commitments? I've not seen them. I mean, he has said it, but I've not seen them. I've been in Parliament myself. I've not seen anything that has materialized. I really would want to say something positive about him. Unfortunately, he disappoints me by depriving me of that opportunity.
All right, so what are you going to do now? There's the bid in Banjul. You're going to speak to your people.
Yes,
and start demonstrating.
And I can tell you, Peter, we have the authority. This country belongs to a people, and those people are the authors of this country. They are the arbiters in political issues. So it's not about Chamisa, Mnangagwa. It's about what the people want. And that's why I told you that there's going to be a proper inauguration very soon. New Zimbabwe is coming. You will see it. The people of Zimbabwe will ultimately take destiny in their own hands and say who they want them to live. You remember what happened with Mr. Mugabe in November?
Yeah.
Did you foresee that?
So you're saying we'll see the same with Mr. Mnangagwa?
I'm not saying that you'll see the same, but I'm just saying there are many unforeseeables in circumstances where the people want their freedom.
Do you think the army in Zimbabwe will allow you to be president? They've said it before in the past that they would never allow that to happen.
It's an army of the people. It's supposed to be patriotic. It's supposed to be professional. And after all, we don't go and get legitimacy from the army. We don't ask the army to vote us. For a person to be a leader in this country, they must be voted. You don't have to be supported by barracks or by battalions. That's not what it is. But of course, we have the problem of the role of the military in our politics. That it has to be dealt with in the context of national discourse, so that we roll back the frontiers of their involvement in civilian politics. So that at the end of the day, the bullet is not defining the ballot, but the ballot is defining the bullet. So that at the end of the day, it's politics governing the gun, not the gun governing or guiding politics, or even distorting politics. That has to be sorted out. It's part of the national discourse.
Let's assume that you're not going to win or get President Mnangagwa out of power for the next 5 years, what can you do to contribute to a better Zimbabwe?
So it will not be there. Mr. Mnangagwa is not in office on account of being voted for. He is not the legitimate president of this country. He is the disputed leader of Zimbabwe. I have basis to say that. The people of Zimbabwe know it. That's why you saw the pathetic show, even in terms of the celebrations, in terms of the support of the people. He knows he does not have support. Very soon we are going to be embarking on a nationwide tour to make sure that we go back to the people. He will also do the same. So we'll see, you know, who gets the support of the people of Zimbabwe.
But let's assume, let's just take an assumption for a moment,
Sure.
that he remains president for the next 5 years. What can you do in the interim to help Zimbabweans to a better life?
I'm ready to give ideas. But the problem is that you can't give ideas when there are no takers. There is neither the table nor people who are willing to utilize those ideas. Mr. Mnangagwa does not have capacity to process good ideas. For the past 38 years, he has been accustomed to their way of doing things. You know, hustling. That is what they are used to. Corruption. That's what they are used to. So he will promise you 1,000,000 times that, yes, there's going to be zero tolerance to corruption. But that's his words. His deeds are completely the opposite.
Zimbabwe has changed quite a bit in the last 9 months. You know, we've got journalists coming into the country, being able to report more freely.
But I thought you were just reporting even before.
Not in the same way. I mean, it's much freer now.
And let me just debunk this, Peter. For a long time, I've seen the attempt to try and make a distinction between Mugabe and Mnangagwa. It's the same old system. Like I said, there is just but a change of a haircut. That does not make Peter Ndoro a different person. He's the same person. Now you say, I know Peter Ndoro looks more handsome now. He has a bald head. It's the same Peter Ndoro.
But the police are not harassing people in the same way that they used to.
But you have seen the harassment. People have had to be terrorized in the villages. You have seen that. It's happening. It's even the military. You saw what happened on the 1st of August. Is that change? When unarmed citizens are shot, killed in cold blood.
But he said that he's setting up an inquiry and that that's responsible.
An inquiry is an investigation, which actually is a further problem, confirming that he doesn't know what is happening. Now, if you are a president, you want an inquiry to know a person, a soldier who has used a gun against an unarmed civilian. Are you worth to be in government? Are you worth to be in leadership? Why do you need an inquiry? You know who has got a gun at any particular point in time. You know who gives an instruction at any particular point in time. If you don't know, then you don't know why you should be a president. That's a problem.
Are you ready to be president?
I was ready.
You're capable of being a president.
I was ready yesterday. The people of Zimbabwe already endorsed my capability. Mnangagwa made out. His supporters made out. But the people of Zimbabwe have supported. How would you go to an election? It has never happened in the history of this country, Peter, that you would get over 2.6 million for the opposition. It's not possible. Even Mr. Mnangagwa, by their own tally, his 2 million or so is an exaggeration. He doesn't have that figure. That's why when he walks around, he's jeered, not cheered. That's why when he walks around, he's ridiculed and not celebrated.
He was being cheered at the sports stadium.
By his supporters, yes. A few. Now, a drop does not make an ocean.
But they have 2/3 majority in parliament, which means...
They don't have, we've challenged the results. So it's a fact that they don't have the 2/3. Because we saw what they did in the rural areas.
So what do you think the rural area vote would have been then if it had been free and fair in your view?
Of course, we won in most of the rural areas. Do you know in the majority of constituencies, I defeated Mnangagwa in the rural areas, in the farming areas. It's only one or few constituents where they ballooned the vote, especially in Marsh Central.
So you're saying you'd be a majority in parliament as well?
Of course. Of course. You will see once we start to unravel what is happening in the electoral court, assuming that there's justice there, you will see the truth.
When's that going to happen?
We've already started the process. In fact, we've challenged over 30 constituencies where we are challenging the result.
And so when will Zimbabweans start to see your truth?
Well, they're already starting to see it. For example, I mean, the Constitutional Court was all fully covered. It's not as if the election was conducted in some planet, Mars or Venus. It was in Zimbabwe. People know what happened. So it doesn't matter what they say in court. The reality and the truth is known.
All right. As we start to wrap, I'm looking towards the future now. You can't keep on going to elections as an alliance. Surely you need to come together now and say, look, let's leave all these separate parties and come under one banner. Is that likely to happen, or are we going to continue to see BT with his own party coming, sitting next to you under this MDC Alliance banner?
Two things there. An alliance is not a bad thing. To aid is to work together. To subtract is to weaken. So an alliance as a concept is good. The coming together of people is very, in fact, we are going to go into a broad alliance. We are going to try and invite all the other 22 candidates, 21. Mr. Mnangagwa, of course, is not part of that, to be part of the broad coalition of the alternative, if we are to be able to deal with this problem. And that is the discourse we are currently embarking on, to make sure that we have all these other parties coming together to support our initiative together as a one bloc in an alliance format. But on the issue of the alliance partners, we have already started a process of them, especially for those who were with the MDC. We are going back to the original MDC. We are going back to having one solid and comprehensive organic institution. That process is already underway. In fact, part of what we are going to be having in the days to come and months to come is that process, because we are already in Parliament together. So we are inseparable.
Will you be trying to get other independents like Mam Juru, for example?
That's what I've already said. It's very important. And in fact, like I said, you know, it's important for us to add. To add is to strengthen. We don't want to weaken ourselves by subtracting. So yes, any progressive Democrat is supposed to be part of this broad, you know, coalition of Democrats going forward.
All right. We have a lot of South African viewers watching on our national broadcaster. Opposition leader, one of the opposition parties, EFF leader, said, "You're young. Take this on the nose and be ready next time around." President Ramaphosa was here. He's endorsed this election. What do you tell the people of South Africa about going forward now when they're being told by their leaders that, hang on, you know, move on?
Well, very unfortunate that we had those remarks without the full comprehension of what the problem is. We are not in a normal situation. I wish we had a situation like in South Africa where there's free and fair elections. We do not have free and fair elections in this country. So we must go back to the drawing board and deal with the issue of free and fair elections. Once we have dealt with that, we'll then be able to congratulate whoever is won under those circumstances. But as it is, my appeal to President Ramaphosa and my appeal to other leaders in the region is for them to help Zimbabweans help themselves in having democracy, in going back to freedom, in achieving what was achieved by South Africa in 1994, a freely democratic society, a properly democratic society. We don't have such. We need a free Zimbabwe. We need a democratic Zimbabwe. And that Zimbabwe is not yet there. Mr. Mnangagwa promised it, but it was a ruse. He promised us democracy, but what we are seeing is a worse version of what Mr. Mugabe was giving us and dishing out for the past 38 years.
And your message to Zimbabweans in the diaspora, should they come home?
Well, look, I can't ask them to walk into the den of lions. We have to clear the den and get rid of the lions first, literally and metaphorically. Then we can say, yes, it's now a happy paradise. As it is, we have problems, and those problems have to be dealt with. So I can't be the one who is dishonest and deceitful to say, please, Zimbabweans, come back home. Because home is not home right now. Home is something that is unacceptable. And we would wish home were home, but that is not. And that is a problem.
Mr. Chamisa, thank you very, very much indeed for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.